Hello to everyone. Thank you to be seated. Please, we're going to start the conference. Thanks a lot. It's time right now. So, very welcome to the 5th conference on Geological Repositories, 4 years after the last one in Toronto. During today, we'll share social, political, scientific, and economic views on the topic, taking stock of progress, and above all, of course, we'll share information and experience about the safe implementation of geological repositories, particularly in policy development and regulatory frameworks. We'll attend speakers and panelists from many countries, such as Canada, Japan, the US, Finland, Switzerland, the UK, Sweden, Czech Republic. Thanks to all of them for participating to this conference. A few practical informations. You all get the programs. It's provided in the welcome bag you got at the entrance with practical information and even some goodies. And in this program, you could see that there are 6 different sessions today and tomorrow. All of them are conducted in English, except session 2 this afternoon, which will be mostly conducted in French because it's focused on the French situation, with nearly only French speakers and panelists. In all the sessions, chairs and I will give you the floor to ask your questions, of course. And you will be provided a microphone, so you will be in position to ask yourself your questions. But if you prefer, you found cards on your chairs, 2 different cards, which allow you to write down your questions. And of course, if you prefer, you can give them to people who get through around during the day. You just have to precise the number of the session, and these cards will be collected, brought to me, and of course, I will try to read the questions out loud and ask the appropriate speaker to respond, so you've got the choice. Probably all the questions won't be answered, and we'll do our best for that, but if you can't, if they're not answered, you have the opportunity to approach the speakers during the break points to ask your questions, of course. By the way, when you ask your questions, please don't forget to identify yourself. And another point, conference is being videotaped, so you'll find the video on the ICGR website. Other precisions, exhibitions, maybe you've seen them already. There are 4 exhibition booths, France, Canada, Japan, Sweden. Information about their repository progress, pick up information, everything possible there. They'll be set up throughout the 2 days. Coffee break, the first is at 10:15. It will take place in the atrium. Just take a left past lovely exhibitions we just talked about. Then you find coffee in the atrium, and the same for other coffee breaks. Lunch facility, this time you've got to go from the CC1 to the main level, rez-de-chaussée, just where you entered. You'll find the cafeteria on the ground floor, and you must use cash. I just precised no CB allowed, so you'll find a cash point in the red chair coffee in case. And if you need information or help, don't hesitate to ask people with red lanyards, namely Mary, Isabel, they will help you. If you need an internet access, you'll find it. It's the hotspot OECD, and there's no password, which is easy. Okay, so now I propose you to start really the conference with Mr. William Magwood, Director General of the Nuclear Energy Agency. Mr. Magwood.
Bonjour, mes amis. It's good to see all of you here this morning. It's a real pleasure for me to open up this conference. For a lot of reasons. First, this is the first of these conferences in 4 long years. And over the last 4 years, there's been a tremendous amount of progress being made that we're going to both recognize and celebrate over the course of the next couple of days. For me, I look back at my career Before coming to the NEA, I was a commissioner with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Before that, I was head of the Civilian Nuclear Research Program at the Department of Energy in the United States. Before that, I was with the Trade Association with the electric utilities. And before that, I started my career at Westinghouse Electric Corporation. In all those positions, I had to work on nuclear waste issues. From the very beginning of my career, the very first job was doing thermal analysis on nuclear waste storage and disposal systems. And when I look back at those many, many years, I sometimes, I think I share this with many colleagues, get a little frustrated when I think about all the years have gone by and how little progress was made for so many years. When I first started my career, we were right in the beginning of the Yucca Mountain project in the U.S. Not the very beginning, but in the very early stages. And 3 decades later, not much progress. However, when you look around the world today, things have begun to shift. We've started to see the change. It's very much a pleasure to have this conference take place now, when just a few weeks ago in Finland, we see that the very first nuclear waste deep geological repository for high-level waste receives a license. That's something that's truly important to recognize. Similar progress is being made in other countries, particularly Sweden and France. We're watching those very closely as both those countries move forward as well. As this progress is being made, we're seeing important examples being set for others to follow. And I think the examples are extremely important in this case because for many people around the world, the issue of nuclear waste is this unsolvable problem that's facing the world. When you talk to many members of the public, NGO groups and others, you hear very commonly, we don't know what to do with this material. It's going to be dangerous for hundreds of thousands of years. We have no idea what to do. This conference, I think, stands importantly as a symbol that we know what to do with nuclear waste. We know what the solutions are. And the solutions from a technical standpoint are well within our capabilities to solve. From a regulatory standpoint, somewhat more difficult. Important issues. We have to deal with the issues of intergenerational fairness. We have to deal with how do you assure safety over very, very long periods of time. And sometimes these discussions become as much philosophy as they are scientific. However, I think and I think the Finland case shows this, we know how to solve those problems as well. The difficult problems, and the problems that are probably the most challenging, are the ones that are not technical issues. How do we communicate with stakeholders? How do we convince people to trust the experts and trust the regulators and trust the industry that they know how to dispose these materials safely and effectively? There are so many bad examples in the past of engineers providing assurance that they knew how to dispose of something or deal with a problem, only decades later to discover that it wasn't quite the solution we thought it was, and now it will cost so much more to clean up the problem. So we have to be able to be credible. We have to assure the public, we have to assure our stakeholders that we know what we're doing. This is very, very difficult. When you stand in front of a crowd of stakeholders and say that we know how to make sure that something is safe for 1 million years, it takes a lot of credibility to say that without being ridiculed. But we have to do that. We have to earn that credibility. And I think the progress that we've seen from Pasiva is a good example of where we can show that progress is being made. Deep geological repositories are important for a variety of reasons. Obviously, we have the legacy of waste that we have to dispose of. We can have discussions about what we can do with the waste. There's lots of research going on in different countries looking at ways of considering advanced recycling or partitioning and transmutation. There's a lot of people who talk about that sort of thing. You still need a geological repository. It's very important to note that as countries go forward with their programs, there's an important incentive for each country to deal with its waste. But yet there's still conversations about can countries work together on these programs as well. I think it's also important to have those conversations, but not at the distraction of stopping the progress that we're making today in so many countries. Today, as we begin this conference, we can see that not only can we make progress as individual nations, but we can make progress as a community, working together and sharing information, sharing lessons learned, sharing both technical lessons learned, but also lessons learned on how to build consensus, how to build trust within stakeholder communities to make progress in each country. That's largely the point of the organization like the NEA, to provide a framework for countries to work together, to share their information and share their experience, and help each other. As many of you know, we have the Forum on Stakeholder Confidence, which is a group of experts that work together to encourage stakeholder exchange among different countries, and also to provide a basis for experts coming into a country to give independent views and input as stakeholders and countries are deciding on what to do about nuclear waste siting issues. This is something that's very important to help build confidence, and it's something we're very happy to be a part of. The NEA may be growing soon. Just very recently, 2 countries, Romania and Argentina, have both applied to join the NEA as member countries. Both countries have nuclear waste issues that they need to solve. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity to engage these countries as they come into the fold to help share the knowledge that has been gained in countries like Finland, Sweden, and others, in France, with those countries as they try to solve their problems in the longer-term future. Another area that we're very interested in the NEA is making sure that there's a new generation of people to help solve problems over the long term. Nuclear waste is an issue that won't be solved by the people in this room entirely. Some of these issues will have to go on for decades, and therefore it's very, very important that there be a new generation of scientists and engineers, of policymakers who are equipped to deal with these issues over the course of time, to deal with the science issues, to deal with the regulatory issues, to deal with the stakeholder issues in a credible way. And to help with that, we've invited a group of young professionals to join us in this conference. You'll interact with these young people over the course of the next few days and have an opportunity to share your insights with them. And hopefully they'll gain insights from their experience here that they can take forward over the course of time. We think this is very important. So these 14 young professionals who are with us today, welcome. We're looking forward to the discussion with you, and I look forward to sitting down with you later this morning. This group has a very challenging program ahead. There's going to be a lot of work over the next 3 days, a lot of important discussions. And we're pleased to have so many senior people from around the world here today, from all over the globe, to share information and to share their thoughts and insights. And we look forward to making continued progress in the disposal of high-level waste so that when this conference is held 4 years from now, we can cite even more countries that have taken the step to dispose of these materials in a safe and effective way, in a way that builds public confidence. So with that, let me declare this conference open, and we look forward to hearing from all of you over the next few days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director General. Thank you. Can you hear me? It's okay? Right, so now I propose you to give the floor to Mrs. Virginie Tratz. She's Director of Energy, France Ministry of Environment, Sustainable Development and Energy. Here is France welcoming country, so we'll give you the floor. Thanks.
Thank you. Good morning. Director General Magwood, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here with you this morning for the opening of this 2016 International Conference on Geological Repositories. I'd like to express my deep gratitude to the Nuclear Energy Agency and to Mr. Magwood for choosing France for the venue of this year's edition of the ICGR. And on behalf of the French government, I'd like to welcome you all to Paris and hope that aside from the interest of the conference itself, you will have some time to enjoy the city. I'd also like to thank Andra for co-organizing this event. Managing radioactive waste and spent fuel in a safe and responsible way is a daunting task, especially when it comes to the geological repositories. But when you believe, as we do in France, and as many of you probably do, that nuclear energy, along with renewable energy, will play a major role in generating electricity in the long run, in a low-carbon future, you need to find solutions for adequate management of this radioactive waste. It's our responsibility as a generation to develop the solutions for that as far as we can. And France has striven to achieve this since the outset of its nuclear program almost 70 years ago. This journey has been one of overcoming scientific and technical challenges, of course, but often it has also been about public acceptability and acceptancy. In particular, France has been on the track towards Geological Repository for its intermediate and high-level waste for more than 25 years now. And we are currently at a key phase on this journey, facing new and unexplored challenges. Before I talk of these challenges and opportunities, I'd like to go back a little bit on what happened in the last 25 years, very quickly, and share with you some of our lessons learned and on how we got up to where we're now and how we see the future. 1991 was actually our turning point. After many technical studies in the 80s, a program of geological studies for a repository was launched on 4 selected sites. This was when we thought things would begin. But this program triggered such strong protests locally that the Prime Minister declared a 1-year moratorium on all activities related to the repository. This was when we understood that we could not go on as we did previously with facilities for low and intermediate level waste that were sited and operated by the industry with no serious difficulties. For geological disposal facilities, we had to find other ways. And a parliament member, Mr. Christian Bataille, was asked to review this issue with all the stakeholders. And in 1991, a new specific law had been drafted and voted. I'm not sure the slides are working, but it doesn't matter. First of all, this law created an independent, dedicated public organization in charge of waste management with the objective to protect the environment and future generations. ANDRA was born, and independence from waste producers and focus on the environment and populations were seen as major requirements to manage safely our radioactive waste. Secondly, the law decided a 15-year research period on the 3 alternatives that were under discussion at that time: long-term storage, geological disposal, and separation and transmutation. And the 1991 law called for another law to be discussed after this 15-year period. And then the law set a number of important principles. Disposal in France of foreign waste, which was a major concern at the national and at the local levels, was clearly prohibited. Underground laboratories could only be authorized through a specific procedure with adequate public participation, and dedicated local structures were to be created to finance projects facilitating local development and public acceptancy for an underground laboratory. After the tensions at the end of the 80s, this law created the conditions to start again on a new foot. And 15 years were dedicated to research, and an underground laboratory was opened in the east of France after a political consensus with local community leaders. Paradoxically, it was after protests were organized on this site in the Bure region that the clear response of the mayors in favor of the project emerged, and that it became possible to move forward. The results of the research that had been carried out for the 15 years were then discussed in a public debate in 2005, and a new law on radioactive waste management was voted in 2006. It confirmed geological disposal as the main option for long-term management of high-level waste and gave a new long-term perspective 2025 was set as the objective for starting operation of the repository. A new core principle was also decided. The producer of the waste remains responsible ultimately. There can be no transfer of technical or financial liability either to ANDRA or to the government in the French system. And regarding financing, the law provides that not only should there be sufficient provisions in the producer's account, there should also be sufficient cash or financial assets set aside in advance to cover the future costs of nuclear waste and spent fuel management. Whatever happens to the company, we want to make sure that the money will be there when we need it. This remains one of the key principles on which our policy is based, along with the long-term management of radioactive waste by ANDRA, the independent organization, a very strong focus on transparency with our radioactive waste and spent fuel management policies being defined in a national plan that is discussed continuously within a pluralist group, including public authorities, but also industrials and NGOs. And special attention to local community support with financing provided for territorial projects. We all know that siting projects requires the long-term support of local communities and authorities. So this is where we are today in our radioactive waste management policy. I hope this showed you how much we benefited from the direct implementation of the lawmakers, with the Parliament setting clear long-term goals and calling for new laws every couple of years as we make progress in our policy. There was a law in 1991 calling for a new law in 2006, a law in 2006 calling for a new law on reversibility in 2016. And this has really been key in going forward. The principles we have adopted and the journey we've gone through are of course specific to the French context. But I would say that giving the public a clear notion of what the intentions are with a long-term forward-looking perspective, clearly setting the objective of protecting the environment and the public, and acknowledging that radioactive waste is a national responsibility that has to be dealt with in a transparent and comprehensive way, are probably things to be considered in many countries. And these principles were reflected in the 2011 European Directive and are shared among the 28 members of the European Union. With this background, today in 2016, we've reached a stage where we are about to finalize the engineering design of our National Geological Disposal Facility project called ICGR. This facility for our high and intermediate level waste will be located about 150 miles east of Paris in a geological formation of argillite with a target depth of 500 meters. In 2005, ANDRA completed a study of this geological formation and submitted a report that proved that there was sufficient evidence that long-term safety of a repository sited in this zone could be achieved and proved. And the Nuclear Safety Authority confirmed this in 2006. In 2013, the government decided to organize a national public debate focused on the ICGR project. This was organized by our independent National Commission on Public Debates. Unfortunately, because of the actions of a minority, I could say a radical minority among the opponents, the public hearings couldn't take place. And so after a couple of attempts, the Commission had to cancel the public hearings and take the debate online. But hundreds of questions were asked and answers were published, live debates were broadcasted over the internet, and a consensus conference was organized. And even though it was difficult to organize, very practical conclusions came out of this debate. First, the necessity for ANDRA to pursue its effort to improve stakeholder involvement, continuously work with stakeholders stakeholder expertise groups, opening up environmental monitoring facilities to the stakeholders, and increasing cooperation on the safety demonstration in general. Secondly, the public asked that the CGO facility should start progressively, beginning with what we call a pilot phase, in order to confirm the soundness of the design and the operating rules. They didn't completely want to take for granted what we were telling them, and they wanted us to show them that it could work during this pilot phase before we went further. And third, the operation of the facility should be directed by a master plan to be revised regularly with the stakeholders to define all the steps, the content of this pilot phase, the flexibilities, and the schedule for progressive sealing of the boreholes, shafts, and repository. CGO is now as a turning point. In 2016, a lot happened, but the project is facing new challenges regarding technical design, cost optimization, licensing procedures, reversibility, and social acceptability. Andra has now launched the final phase of engineering design, and this will bring to the final licensing procedure at the end of the 2-year period. Andra has also launched in the beginning of the year a document which is the base of a dialogue with local stakeholders. And the French government has asked local authorities to coordinate what we call an area development contract to implement successfully this project. This contract will be an important tool to discuss with local communities the way to implement the project, taking advantage of their local strength, but also empowering potential weaknesses. It will extend the work that had been done with them by Andra for several years. But this contract is really one of the building blocks of strong, sustained local ownership of the program. We have been lucky in having continuous support of the local authorities, of many stakeholders locally, but we need to continue to build on this ownership if we want the project to be a success. And this new version of this contract, this area development contract, is expected in the coming months. Now, I wouldn't want to give you the impression that everything is easy. In 2015, last year, we had very intense debates on the cost of the project. The law states that the government has to give an estimate, publish an estimate of the cost of the project. And this discounted, optimized cost was evaluated to be 25 billion euros. This is an ambitious target that will guide Andra for the years to come. But we need to remember that discussing something that could be in operation and construction for the next 140 years, something that has never been built, is a little bit like asking our grandfathers to discuss 50 years ago the price of a smartphone. We really need to be modest about it. But this figure also gives you an idea of how big the challenge is for Andra and for the French nuclear industry in terms of implementation and project management to build this one-of-a-kind facility. Again, Andra will be doing something it has never done before in the type of project, the size of project, the extent of this project. And I know that they are completely dedicated to organizing themselves to be at the level they need to be to manage this. This year, we've also encountered intensified public opposition. During the summer, opponents have fought against the attempts by Andra to secure the perimeter of the future surface facilities. A new kind of demonstration, mixing peaceful opponents with violent ones, has brought new challenges for public authorities. We feel that this will be a growing issue because as the project goes on and as heavy work is conducted locally, there is a risk that opposition will increase. Of course, this issue is not specific to geological repositories, and in France we've seen it with airports, hydro dams, and so on. But it must be considered very seriously because of its possible impact on the implementation process. On a more positive note, a new law setting a definition of reversibility, as called by the law of 26, and considered as a crucial issue in France for public acceptancy, was discussed and voted in the Parliament this year. This law also opens the way towards the licensing process and building of the facility by defining how the future steps will be organized. The law defines reversibility as the ability for successive generations either to continue the construction and exploitation of the storage or to reassess the choices made previously and change management solutions. Andra will implement this principle when designing and operating the storage. The Parliament also voted to have a pilot phase, as the public had asked in the public debate of 2013. I hope this overview of the French context has shown you that while the process is long and intense, we are making progress towards a geological repository. Sometimes I share the frustration that General Director Magwood expressed, but when we look back over this long period of time, a lot has been done and we are going forward. This progress has been made possible, I think, by adopting over time a very prudent trial and error, step-by-step approach with a huge input from Parliament, but also local authorities, and the wish to open the discussion to the public as often and as much as was possible. So we are happy to acknowledge everything that has been done, but also very modest in saying this, because of the strong awareness of the many challenges still ahead of us before we actually have a repository in operation and we start putting our waste there. The discussions that you will have in this conference will help us all to share experiences, to get mutual feedback, and improve our collective knowledge on the challenges linked to geological repositories. This is priceless, and I'd therefore like to thank you all for being here and wish you a very fruitful conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this presentation. We'll come back to the French story and the ICGR project this afternoon during session 2, but it was very interesting to talk about it right now and to understand where we are exactly. So we're just earlier than planned. It's great. We have more time for coffee break. I propose you to come back earlier than planned too. It will let more time to talk together. So you can now leave and go to the atrium after the exhibition booth, and I propose you to come back at 2025. Thanks a lot. So let's start with session 1, National Geological Disposal Projects, a session which will be shared in 2 parts right now, this morning, before lunch. First one is about status of National Geological Repository projects. The chair, which is just sitting down me, is Jean-Paul Minon, chairman of Radioactive Waste Management Committee of the Nuclear Energy Agency. And besides him, 4 speakers who will talk around 15 minutes each, and after that you'll have time for questions and answers. I remind you of that. You can raise your hands or raise the cards, and they'll be collected, brought to me, and I will say instead of you or give you speech if you prefer. So the panelists and the speakers just beside you are Thomas Ernst, CEO of NAGRA, Switzerland, Bruce McCurdy, Managing Director and Executive Director of UK Radioactive Waste Management, Christy Lex, US Sandia National Laboratories, and Christopher Ekeberg, President of SKB. And I don't know how to pronounce it in Swedish, but I know that Jean-Paul knows it very well, so we will do it. We will do it too. So to start, if you want, I'll give the floor to Jean-Paul Minon for a brief introduction.
Thank you. Good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure to be with you today to begin with the technical part, I would say, of our conference. This conference... Okay, Mary? It's okay. Okay, this conference is the fifth that we have had since 1999 in Denver. And you see through the different headlines of the different conference that is a progress in our job. Even if that progress is slow, there is a progress. As you see, in Denver, we were facing challenges. In Stockholm, we identified the political and the balance between politics and techniques. Then, in Bern in 2007, it was the way to implement. We recognized that we have one goal, but there are different paths to reach that goal. In Toronto, we emphasize the need to have a strong national commitment, but also a strong and fair local implementation. And today, and it was one of the conclusions of the Toronto conference, I make the link with the conclusion of the Toronto conference, we are facing now the phase of implementing geological disposal. First of all, I think that there is a main message. That is that for spent fuel and high-level waste, geological disposal is recognized as safe and feasible solution. This is a concept, and naturally, it is easy to have a concept, but we have to implement it. But slowly, but regularly, the law take this concept over. For instance, at European level, the European Directive Euratom, it is a European law, recognized that geological disposal is the solution for geological disposal. This is an important conceptual way forward. The implementation is not only a technical issue. We identified in the time that this solution has to be implemented in accordance with the principle of sustainable development. First of all, the solution has to be environmentally responsible. Safety is the priority that we'll all have. When I say all, it is the implementer, the regulator, but also the general public. Everybody wishes to have a safe and environmentally sound solution. Naturally, this is also to develop in accordance with society. We are, as waste management agencies, part of society. We work for society. Very often we look at society as a stakeholder, but we are also a stakeholder, I would say, of ourselves. Society needs to have a geological disposal, needs to have a solution for spent fuel and high-level waste, and we have to implement that solution with society and within society. Naturally, safe is the priority, but it must also be economically feasible. So we have to pay, and we will discuss, I suppose, the cost issue later. And all of these points are framed in a regulatory environment and naturally by law. Evolution since 2012, the Toronto conference. 2 countries are well advanced, and congratulations to our Finnish colleague that have now a license to construct the Geological Repository in Finland. Sweden followed because they have, according to the law in Sweden, already 1 positive statement. They are awaiting the second one to go further. Processes are running well in as a country, France, our hosting country, Canada, Switzerland. Those processes are characterized by the good balance between local and national commitments. We had an incident in the waste isolation pilot plant in the States. And this incident was an opportunity to learn. Safety culture is important, as in all nuclear installations, and naturally we have to look and have a very efficient contractors management. But this incident doesn't put in question the principle of geological disposal. New developments of new ideas also raised in South Australia with the concept of accepting the waste of foreign countries. The issue is now under discussion, and you say that recently the state government in South Australia made a statement being open for pursuing the opportunity for South Australia, but without commitment. IEA and IFNEC have also a look on international repositories. This is an issue at stake also that is often tackled, certainly for small countries with small programs where a repository would not necessarily be justified, and also for countries that would like to opt for nuclear energy without being involved in the entire fuel cycle. And now to launch the discussion for the coming days, some issues at stake. Some were already present at Toronto, but there are more and more present at the time. It is naturally the industrialization phase, the site organization, operating on a safe way, the geological disposal, how to organize that, the cost, because no repository without being able to pay for it, so the money has to be there. We are approaching the industrial phase, so the estimations are becoming more and more accurate, but also more and more expensive. So the issue is also quite sensitive in all our countries. Another process is that this installation is a first of a kind for the operator and also the regulator. There are other examples, as the European nuclear reactor, the EPR, and it is important that the process towards licensing would be smooth and well prepared. So the new concept of the development of the concept of pre-licensing is an important issue that we should discuss. And then it is also of paramount importance to be aware that it is not a site that we are licensing, it is not the waste that we have to put in a repository. It is a whole system that we have to develop and to implement on a safe way. And when I speak about the system, it is the source term, naturally the fuel or the high-level waste, the engineered barrier, and the host rock. And it is all those three elements that have to be able to perform on a standalone way on the long run. That was the message I would like to give you. And before ending, I would will underline the importance of international cooperation in developing geological disposal. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, gentlemen. So now, as planned, we can welcome the first speaker, Thomas Ernst, CEO of NAGRA Switzerland, with a presentation about radioactive waste management in Switzerland and progress since 2012.
Merci bien pour cette introduction, ladies. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm pretty glad that I have the chance to give you an update on radioactive waste management in Switzerland. And I can assure you we had some progress within the last 4 years. Let's have a look at electricity production in Switzerland. This electricity production is almost CO2 free. 40% is produced by nuclear power plants and almost 60% is hydropower. Our government decided in the aftermath of the Fukushima event in 2011 a staged phase-out. This phase-out is planned within the next approximately 20 years. The first power plant that is going to be shut down is the Mühleberg power plant. That will happen in 2019. Probably you have heard about a votation we had about 10 days ago. We had a national votation about an initiative of the Green Party who wanted a very fast shutdown of the 5 nuclear power plants. This initiative was rejected by 54% no. In Switzerland, we have interim storage facilities that are running and that are operational. They offer enough storage capacity to fill the gap between the shutdown of the nuclear power plant and the going into operation of the deep geological repositories. This is still a few decades away. In Switzerland, we have a necessity of 2 deep geological repositories, one, as in almost every country, for high-level waste and spent fuel, and another one also for low and intermediate level waste. This is part of our regulation. The site selection follows the rules of the so-called sectoral plan for deep geological repositories. This sectorial plan was set into force in April 2008 by the Swiss federal government. It defines all the boundary conditions, it defines clear roles of the different stakeholders, and it defines also the criteria how the sites should be selected. It's a stepwise approach. This sectorial plan contains 3 different stages. At the moment, we are in the second part of stage 2. The first priority for the criteria for selecting sites is safety. So the Swiss approach is definitely not a so-called volunteer approach. The whole process is led by the Swiss Federal Office of Energy. Stage 1 is already finished. We have a final decision of the Swiss federal government concerning stage 1. Probably those of you who were present in Toronto 4 years ago, there I explained that NAGRA had the task to look at the whole area of Switzerland, to really check out all the possibilities of the deep geological underground in our country. And in the end of 2008, we proposed 6 siting regions that were, according to our opinion, suitable for hosting a geological repository. These proposals, they went through a review. The Swiss Nuclear Safety Inspectorate wrote a review about our proposals. We had a public consultation. And at the end of 2011, the Swiss federal government confirmed all 6 proposed siting regions as in principle suitable for constructing a repository. That was a first milestone in the site selection program in Switzerland, and this was also the starting point for stage 2. Stage 2 has been running now for some years, exactly since beginning of 2012. Stage 2 consists of 2 major elements. The first one is the discussion about the location of the surface infrastructure in the different siting region. This discussion is part of a participation process. I will give you more information in just a moment. And of course, the second one is a site-specific evaluation and a safety-based comparison of the 6 remaining siting regions. Let's start with locating surface facility. In order to be able to start a process of participation, of course, you do need a structure and an organization for such a process. This process was established by the Swiss Federal Office of Energy by the end of 2011, and in each of the 6 siting regions, a so-called regional conference was established. Regional conferences have about 100 members each. 1/3 of them usually are representative of the regional authorities of the communities. 1/3 are representatives of parties, organizations, including NGOs, and 1/3 of the seats are reserved for so-called ordinary citizens. So it was quite demanding to start this process, but I'm really pleased that all regions really were very engaged and tried to establish those regional conferences as efficiently as possible. The first major topic they had to discuss was this locating of surface facilities. In 2012, NAGRA proposed 20 possible sites for such surface facilities. The proposals were discussed very intensively. In some regions, the members of the regional conferences were not satisfied by the criteria we used for our proposals, and they demanded alternative criteria. And according to the new defined criteria, we even published additional surface facility locations. Within the years 2013 and 2014, all regional conferences submitted a final report which expressed their opinion which site of the proposed might be the best, or the one with the most advantages, or also the one with the least disadvantages. Based on these reports, NAGRA published planning studies for locating the surface facilities, and those planning studies were one part of the whole reporting proposals of NAGRA for Stage 2. Of course, the other very important part was the comparison by safety criteria of these 6 siting regions. Following those calculations and also some qualitative evaluation according, of course, of the criteria of the sectorial plan, we could underline that all 6 siting regions were in principle still suitable and acceptable for constructing a deep geological repository. However, the comparison of the decision-relevant features and the corresponding indicators, which are all described in the sectorial plan, showed clear differences between the siting regions. That was the reason why NAGRA proposed in the beginning of last year that we would like to focus the future investigations on the siting regions Jura-Ost and Zürich Nordost, both with the host rock opalinous clay. This is a sediment that is pretty comparable to the host rock that is also favored in France. At the moment, there is really one very intense discussion going on about our proposals, namely the discussion whether the putting on hold of the siting region Nördlich Lägern was justified or not. At the moment, the discussion focuses on things like rock mechanics, engineering feasibility as a function of the depth, because constructing at low depth in the sediment opalinous clay is quite demanding, and it's also a discussion about erosion, future erosion and glaciation in the long-term future. We expect to get a clear message of the Nuclear Safety Inspectorate within the next few weeks, and then it will be pretty clear whether we will be talking about 2 or 3 siting regions that will be further investigated in stage 3. Nevertheless, of course, we already are preparing the work for stage 3. That's why we've already finished 3-dimensional seismic investigation of Jura Ost and Zürich Nordost. We did that in winter 15-16, and at the moment we are performing comparable investigation in the region Nördlich-Lägern. Maybe one remark about these investigations: this siting region is very close to the German border, and we started these investigations on the German side of the River Rhine. This was a pretty important event, but we got all the authorizations and we were able to do all the measurements also on the German side of the Rhine, which gives us a good basis for future safety comparison. Of course, with 3-dimensional seismic investigation, you get a good picture about structure in the deep underground, but this is not sufficient. Additionally, we've already applied for 16 drilling applications in 2 of the 3 regions, and we will apply for an additional set of drilling application also in Nördlich-Lägern, just to make sure that whatever the future decision of the safety authorities and the federal government will be, that we are ready to have the full set of data to do a proper comparison. You see, stage 2 is heading towards its end. We expect the decision of the federal government in about 2 years, after, of course, the safety report of the Nuclear Safety Inspectorate and, of course, a public consultation, and also the publication of the so-called second opinion of the Commission of Nuclear Safety. That's a commission that gives advice to the federal government. After that, we will be heading forward to the 3rd and last stage in the site selection program, stage 3, and the goal of stage 3, of course, is the preparation and the publication of the general license application. Afterwards, the way is still pretty long, because this general license application will not have to be confirmed by the government only. Also, the national government will have to give its approval, and this decision of the national government will be subject to a so-called facultative referendum. In other words, as Switzerland is a direct democracy, it's quite likely that in about 10 to 15 years there will be a national votation about the granting of the general license. After that, there is still a long way to go. As some of the speakers before me already said, you need patience and you need time to accomplish such a mission. Because after the general license application, we will do the construction work for the facilities for underground geological investigation to make sure that the geological properties are really exactly as publicated in the reporting. And further on, then, of course, we do need a construction license and an operating license as well. So we don't expect our deep geological repository to be operational before 2050. Now I would like to come to the conclusion. What are current and future challenges? I can assure you there are a lot of them, not only in Switzerland, but probably in all other countries as well. I think in Switzerland we are pretty glad to have clear boundary conditions in the sectorial plan. The principles and the roles are defined. but it's also essential that you have a strong commitment of all stakeholders to work together and a will to bring this process further. It's important that you have the necessary respect for the different stakeholders and a certain basis of confidence and acceptance. Without that, it's extremely difficult to proceed. What are key success elements? I would like to propose 4 of them. First of all, you do need a strong process owner that keeps the project on track, and this process owner has also to ensure planning reliability. Then, additionally, a credible and independent regulator is an important issue, as well as, of course, an implementer that produces reports on a safe and scientific, convincing technical know-how. And last but not all, and probably that's the biggest challenge, you do need stakeholders that are willing to engage in this process, to work together, and they have also to be willing to accept the basic rules that were defined in the past, and also in the future they will have to accept the result of this very democratic process as it was established by the federal government in Switzerland, called sectorial plan. So that was a short summary of the status in Switzerland. You see some progress was made, but there is still a long way to go. And I would like to finish with this last slide. I think it's a short explanation why we all are here and why international collaboration is also essential to support the different national program intensively. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you very much, Thomas Ernst. And indeed, you need to be patient to achieve this project. Now, do you have any remarks or questions, Jean-Paul, that you'd like to focus, to underline, emphasize, maybe?
Not precisely, but I would give the word to the audience for perhaps during 5 minutes question for clarification.
Okay, so before the question and answer session, if you already have clarification questions to ask, you can raise your hands and we can do it in live. Do you have any? For Nagra and Mr. Ernst? Nobody? Okay, so we're carrying on. So let's welcome Bruce McCurdy. You're Managing Director and Executive Director of UK Radioactive Waste Management, and we'll talk about perspectives from the UK. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity to come and summarise the situation in the UK. So starting with a bit of historical perspective, we've got a long nuclear history, starting back in the late 1940s, although most of these pictures were from the late 1950s. So there's a picture there of our Queen opening Calder Hall, which was the first commercial nuclear reactor in the world. And the picture at the bottom there shows the Windscale piles, or one of the Windscale piles, which were used for development of weapons-grade plutonium, sort of very early on. So as a result of that, there is a big legacy of waste. Now, interestingly, just to put an age on it, that period in the late 50s was around about the time I was born. So when the Queen was opening Calder Hall, I was being born. I'm sort of no longer a spring chicken, as you would say. So you see, so all of this is a long time ago. Interestingly, though, the Queen is still around, still our Queen. Good news for me as well is I'm still around, so that beats all the other options as far as I'm aware. Not so good news, though, is that the legacy of waste that have been generated from this entire programme are mostly still around as well. And whilst work is going ahead to package those wastes from the raw form that you can see in the top left-hand corner there into sort of shiny packages ready for disposal, we don't yet have a disposal facility. And as well as this legacy waste, we also have a commitment in the UK to a new nuclear build programme, and there's an ambition to have 16 gigawatts of new nuclear capacity in the UK. And the combination of the new build programme and the legacy waste mean we'll have about 600,000 cubic metres of waste for disposal, higher activity waste for disposal in a geological disposal facility. So going back over recent history, in 2008 we had a white paper, a government policy document that set out for the first time in the UK a consent-based framework for geological disposal implementation. And that proceeded for a few years, and at the last ICGR conference in Toronto, I explained at that time we had 3 expressions of interest and we were heading towards a decision point. Now at that point in 2013, very shortly after the Toronto conference, one of the 3 local authorities involved decided not to proceed with the process, and that process then came to a halt. So ourselves as implementer and government as policy owner at that stage paused. This prompted a national consultation to try and understand what was wrong with the process, what could be improved with the process, what we could do to actually help us achieve a successful process. And the key themes that emerged from this consultation were that people were expecting us to have done some assessment of geological suitability before approaching those communities to suggest that they volunteer. They wanted to know whether there were reasonable prospects. Understandably, I think local political leaders wanted to know before they risked the political capital whether there was any chance that actually they would be able to host a facility. Decision-making was unclear at that point. So there were different levels of local government, there was national government. It wasn't entirely clear what the process was for going through those different levels of authority and agreeing or disagreeing and deciding whether or not to proceed with the process. Built into the policy in 2008 was a right for communities to withdraw from the process at any stage. So it was a policy commitment, but it was met probably with distrust in communities, and there was a desire to see something firmer, like legislation in place that would absolutely guarantee that if a community wanted to withdraw from the process, they in fact would be able to withdraw from the process. There was a view, I think, that if we and government had invested a large amount of money in investigating a site, that we would be reluctant then to withdraw, even if the community wanted to withdraw. The planning regime for a geological disposal facility hadn't been clarified at the point of the 2008 white paper. There were new planning laws coming into the UK which covered large national infrastructure projects, and whilst it was thought that a geological disposal facility would be designated as a nationally significant infrastructure project, that had yet to be confirmed. So this was one of the themes that emerged from the consultation. Inventory, some clarity would be needed on whether or not any facility would be open for new build wastes as well as legacy wastes. There was a great concern about whether such a facility would ever be used for waste from overseas nuclear facilities, or whether it would be purely a UK facility. And very clearly, amongst all of the communities who responded to the consultation, they wanted better clarity on what the benefits to the community would be and the socio-economic and environmental effects to the community. So as a consequence of the consultation, government then worked towards a new policy document which was published in 2014, and this again set out a siting process which was consent-based, but now it was to be developer-led. We would be the developer, Radioactive Waste Management Limited. The policy document was, at this stage, an enabling document. It addressed many of the issues which were raised by stakeholders, but there were still some, I would say, policy loose ends to be tied off, and they're described under this bullet point which says initial actions. So first of all, to address the issue about geological prospects, we are carrying out a national geological screening exercise. We've established the criteria. They've been reviewed by an independent panel set up by the Geological Society of London. and we're proceeding now with the British Geological Survey to apply those criteria to existing data across the UK, except for Scotland, which are on a different policy. There are two other strands of initial actions. One, amendments to the National Land Use Planning, which picks up this issue I raised about nationally significant infrastructure projects. And the other is to provide clarity on what we would define as a community, who represents the community, how a community gets into the process, how it can get back out of the process, and how we can disperse any investment funds to that community. And then we plan to launch the siting process on completion of those initial actions during 2017. So as a developer-led siting process, it's made us look inward to ourselves. So back in 2012, for the last ICGR, my organisation was actually an organisation within the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. Since then, in 2014, we formed a new company, Radioactive Waste Management Limited, for about 125 of us. We've published our strategy in 2015 that sets out our vision, our values, our mission, sets out the main drivers for what we're doing at the moment, why we're doing them, and how we're going about those things. We've also established a new organisation structure and size of organisation that we need to deliver that strategy. And we've developed a new business model which is based on proactively approaching communities as a developer to try and attract interest in the process and secure a suitable site which has both good geology and a willing community. As well as looking internally, our board and government have commissioned something called an organisational readiness review, where we're having an independent panel of people look at what we're doing, our plans to get ready for launching the siting process, so that by the time we come to the launch in 2017, that's all been independently reviewed. So that's generally all internal stuff and stuff which is within our control. However, other things have been going on in the UK. So the political context, Brexit vote, took us all a bit by surprise, I think. The vote to leave the European Union had really big political implications immediately in the UK. And our fear was that our programme would suffer as a result of that. Certainly the momentum could suffer. As it happens, that wasn't the case. We very quickly got commitment from the new government that it was committed to both new nuclear and to geological disposal. And in fact, it's provided a new focus for us. So regardless of views on Brexit or otherwise, the new government have approved the go-ahead for Hinkley Point C, have reaffirmed a commitment to geological disposal, and in the picture on the right there is a picture of the new Energy Minister on our stand at a nuclear industry conference just last week, where she again reaffirmed commitment to geological disposal. And it's actually been set in a clearer context now. So within this new government, a new department has been formed called Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And the industrial strategy includes the energy policy. Within the energy policy is the role of nuclear, and within the role of nuclear is the role of geological disposal. So it actually presents a very joined-up picture and a good basis for us to continue planning. So to conclude, our current position is we've got the policy that was published in 2014. We're making good progress with the 3 initial actions that I've talked about. We ourselves are a new company with the role of a developer in that consent-based siting process. Post-Brexit, there's a focus on industrial strategy and geological disposal within that, so there's good momentum behind the whole process. And the siting process will be launched in 2017. And we look forward to that, and we look forward to further cooperation with our sister organisations around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goes back to you. Despite Brexit, thank you. We can say, do you have any remarks or not, Jean-Paul? Not especially, not yet. Do you have any question or remarks right now? Yes, we're going to give you a microphone. Is it possible?
Alan Old Group from the UK. It's just one point to keep remembering. Everybody is focusing on the underground side, the scientific side. What you haven't got to forget is you've got to get down there. And that's part of our business, shaft sinking, tunneling. Don't forget the geological information that's required to enable you to do your shafts and to develop your drifts to be able to build the repositories.
So how are you?
I would entirely agree. Nothing to disagree with that. In fact, we're looking currently at supply chain capability across the whole lifetime of the project, and shaft sinking is one of the first issues that we're going to face where there's a very long lead time.
Okay. Another question or remark? Okay, so we're carrying during question and answers, and we're back to you at this moment. Now let's welcome Christy Leith, US Sandia National Laboratories, for perspectives on the WIP site.
Hello. For those of you who may not recognize me, it is probably because my picture was not in the program because I failed to get it in. But this gives you an opportunity to use that space now while I'm speaking to go ahead and draw a picture of me so that in the future you'll remember, and also it uses the other side of your brain and gets you fully engaged. I am from Sandia National Laboratories. I do not work for DOE. This is a presentation, though, on the behalf of DOE and was approved by DOE for presentation here. And, yes. So basically, I'm going to talk about the status of WIP in operations and WIP getting ready for shipment, and then perspectives on future projects, communication, and pilot plant versus an operating facility. So we are in the process of readying WIP to begin operations again. That includes completing physical changes for WIP, including stabilizing portions of the repository in the form of ground control, increasing ventilation. Interim ventilation system is already in operation, ensuring procedures are updated and workers are trained and prepared for waste emplacement work, and conducting readiness assessments. I just wanted to pause here for a second to make sure that this is in context for everybody. WIP was an operating facility in southeast New Mexico in the USA. It came to a complete and screeching halt in February of 2014, where we did witness an accident where we had a release of radioactive material. Prior to that, we had a fire. So February was not a good month in 2014. So to move on, the operational readiness reviews, performance-based examination of facilities, equipment, personnel, and procedures, ensures safe operation of WIP within the approved safety envelope. There are two. One is the contractor operational readiness review, and in that, independent reviewers assessed NWP readiness to commence receipt and emplacement operations. NWP is really the managing and operating contractor for WIP. They also underwent pre-start findings that must be resolved before restart. So in the review, they did find some things, which is why reviews are done, and they are now working through those things. DOE also has a readiness review, and that has been conducted. The results of those, it was the period up until December 2nd, and I'm not aware of the results of those, but I'm sure any findings that they have will help them in to get ready to start and move into, and will be resolved before the restart. So in any case, there are two regulators for the WIP, and one is a federal regulator, the EPA, and another is a state regulator, and that is the NMED. And so there must be an NMED review and authorization before waste is emplaced again. In terms of ground control, this consists of installing roof bolts and removing unstable ground through scaling and mining. The average weekly failure rate of approximately 40 bolts over 7+ miles of underground drifts. The goal is to install at least 110 bolts per week to maintain currently accessible areas and restore access to restricted areas. Catch-up bolting is complete in the clean areas, and it's largely because in those areas they could follow routine bolting maintenance practices based on their geotechnical surveys, and they didn't have to wear PPE. The catch-up bolting continues in the restricted areas, and this progresses more slowly because everybody has to suit up and be in personal protective equipment, and it's required for crews in these areas. Green is good, red is bad. So you can see here from this picture, the green areas are where they don't have to wear PPE, and the red areas where they do. Ground conditions in the south end of the mine have continued to degrade. A recent series of rock falls in prohibited areas influenced the decision to permanently withdraw from the area. Those of you who may not know, I will let you know that the decision has been made to withdraw from the south end of the repository. There are panels that are filled, and they have not been permanently closed, but they had temporary enclosures, and there have been rock falls that have made it extremely difficult to access those areas, and the decision has been made to withdraw. So the benefits from that is reduces potential employee exposure to ground control hazards and reduces exposure to VOCs, because frankly in some cases even the temporary closures have been squeezed enough that they've popped open. And those temporary enclosures were put there in the first place to protect from VOCs. So the benefit is also to reduce the active area of the underground facility and the resources needed in these areas. It decreases maintenance costs, allows workforce and resources to focus on ground control in the active area, reduces the footprint of the accessible contaminated area, approximately 60% reduction in the contaminated area, and increases available ventilation to panel 7 and occupied areas of the mine. So one thing that's a very big issue is the ventilation, and it's much reduced from what it used to be, and so the air really needs to be targeted where people are working, and closing off part of the repository will help with this. In terms of waste handling, waste emplacement is planned to take place in panel 7. By the way, this is the panel where the release occurred. It was panel 7, room 7. In a contaminated environment, it requires transition from a clean space to a contaminated zone near the opening of panel 7. Waste handling operators working in contaminated zone will utilize personal protective clothing and powered air purifying respirators. Cold operations completed, they tried this, they worked it through, so basically they've had a practice run without actual waste. And the workers were trained and the procedures were refined. So this gives you a picture of the radiological control areas. Again, green is good, and you can see the transition. That very red panel is panel 7, and the transition from green to red where the workers have to change. So preparing for waste shipment. Cleanup activities and waste certification continued during the shutdown. There is a new WIP, waste acceptance criteria. It was issued in July. True waste certification programs currently suspended at the generator sites. Programs at each site must be updated to meet new requirements. CBFO is conducting on-site technical reviews to confirm. CBFO is part of DOE, by the way. 1 review has been conducted and 3 additional planned over the next 4 months. For those of you who may not be aware, one of the issues is that the drum that came and was placed in room 7, panel 7, it ended up having materials in it that were incompatible and created an explosion. So it's only natural that we would go back and relook at our certification processes for these drums. So all previously certified true waste will be evaluated to determine if additional documentation, characterization, or treatment is required. Some waste is already assessed and evaluations ongoing. Evaluation of previously certified waste in WIP is happening, and it's about 92% complete. Significant number of previously certified containers at Idaho and Savannah River site have been evaluated and are ready to ship. When waste emplacement resumes, waste in the waste handling building, we have been holding a good deal of waste in the waste handling building. It was on site when we shut down. It will be emplaced first, and it's expected to take about 90 days. Emplacement rate at startup will be the limiting factor. Current planning is based on emplacement rate of up to 5 shipments a week. Shipping schedule for the first 6 months of operations is currently being developed. The transportation contract status, the proposal evaluations are ongoing with an anticipated award announcement in early 2017. The transition to the new single contract is anticipated to begin in May 2017 and conclude in July 2017. The new contract structure will be the same as the current 2 contracts, which are fixed price contracts requiring dedicated resources, and no disruption to transportation services is anticipated. Future projects. There's a project on surface storage, engineered concrete overpack storage units capable of storing 408 containers, the capacity equal to 136 shipments of CH waste. This enhances operational efficiency by allowing for continued waste shipments and waste receipts during mining and maintenance outages. Also, the permanent ventilation system. As I mentioned before, ventilation is an extremely important issue. You have to get enough air flowing through the mine, especially if you're mining and creating salt dust. The new ventilation shaft and 55,000 square foot ventilation building will be built at the surface. Geotechnical analysis is underway. Provides airflow for underground mining and waste emplacement activities to occur concurrently. Design and cost estimates are expected in 2018. So I'd like to talk a little bit about pilot plant versus an operating facility. This is the waste isolation pilot plant. And as such, one could view the events of the past 2 years as a very, as an experiment. One can expect accidents, and then you can learn from them. So what have we learned from this? One thing that's very important, we have learned that salt does behave as expected. The roof falls, the floor heaves, the walls creep, and open spaces close. In fact, we have a very visual, very pertinent, relevant proof of principle for our repository here. The other thing is that in a period of time like this, one might want to think about the design and operations that change. For example, mine and place and close. So this was basically the original idea. It did not come to fruition for a number of reasons. But in fact, now that we have witnessed what has happened to these rooms sitting idle for a couple of years, it's quite understandable that we might need to move into a different paradigm where we mine in place and actually close the panels as we go. Last thing I'd like to mention is about communications, and that is that while we all expect accidents to happen, and we do many dry runs, let's say, in the case of this particular accident at WIP, we did not really meet the challenge of communication. And the thing that caught us most by surprise is probably the thing that that surprised the networks during the last election in the United States, and that is that you have to account for social media. Social media is the big thing now, and communications will happen. No matter how hard you try to have those communications go through official channels, there's nothing official about communications through social media. Therefore, you have to actually anticipate that this will happen and take control of that along with the other forms of communication as you move forward. Otherwise, you will find that the communications are getting out of hand, and the process is leading to some level of hysteria. So, I already said that. And then I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Christina, for this presentation. And right, we can start with questions right now, and there will be others afterwards. Do you have right now questions or remarks about this presentation, problems that you met, accidents you described, and the way where you are today? Are there some? You can raise your hands. Not yet. You're waiting for afterwards when we have questions and answers. Yes, Champion, of course.
Thank you. I would like to thank DOE and Sandia Laboratories for the openness of communication. I think it is essential for the nuclear industry where, when there are incidents and accidents, that it is clearly communicated about the events, the consequences, and how you can recover the situation. I think it is very, very essential. For me, what happened to WIP emphasize some question we already have, but we didn't tackle systematically up to now. Systematically. First of all, we put the accent on spent fuel and vitrified waste. Here we have other categories of waste. And it is not because we have a solution for vitrified waste or spent fuel that we have a solution for the other categories of waste. This B waste, as we speak in the IAEA classification, is even difficult to manage as the spent fuel and high-level waste. It is a first remark I have. The second I have, it is how difficult it is to elaborate the safety of a disposal facility, because we are facing conflicting situations. The long-term safety can be in conflict with operational safety. And I think that this was also an issue that appeared clearly in the WIP incident. Then also the importance of waste characterization, to know what we put into the repository. That is an essential issue. And then, as you very well said, the importance of social media in an incident and accident management is also of paramount importance. That were the four remarks of...
Yeah, we'll talk that later too, because they're very important questions. I'm sure that all the other participants and presenters will have comments on these issues, namely social media and the way to manage social reactions. So just before that, we can now welcome Christopher Ekeberg, President of the SKB for Perspectives from Sweden.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to come here and speak. When I look back at the presentation that my predecessor gave at the conference in Toronto 4 years ago, I have to conclude that we were slightly optimistic as to how long our licensing process would take. And my reflections after 4 years in this industry is that in order not to slip into the pocket of frustration that DG Magwood referred to, I think we need three things in equal amounts that all start with the letter P: patience, perseverance, and positive thinking. So I hope we have enough of that going forward in our important work. Have the slides, please. There we go. I just want to give an introduction to what's going on in the nuclear industry in Sweden. It is a bit of a changing landscape. Almost half of the electricity generated in Sweden comes from nuclear. And 2 of the 12 reactors were shut down around 2000 for political reasons. And last year, for commercial reasons, another 4 reactors were announced for decommissioning by the owners, starting now and running up to about 2020. The remaining 6 reactors are planned to be operated for a lifetime of 60 years, not another 60 years from today, but from the commissioning dates. So it is a changing landscape. There have been political changes recently to remove the nuclear production tax, which I think sets a sounder commercial basis for the operation of the 6 reactors going forward. But looking at what this means for our job in the back end, it actually doesn't change our mission that much. We're going to have to do some things a bit earlier, we can do some things a bit later, but overall the back end system and the challenges that we face don't change that much. Obviously decommissioning activities are going to move forward, that's a natural consequence. To give a brief overview of what the Swedish back-end system looks like, we have basically 2 streams of waste. The yellow up at the top is the low and intermediate level waste, which SKB picks up from the reactor sites, which, as you saw on the previous map, are located by the sea. And we transport it to our current and operational final repository for the short-lived waste, which is in operation in Forsmark today. We also pick up some waste from industry and research, but that's not our owner's waste, but that's something we do on a cost basis for the rest of society. As you can see, there's a blue section of that repository, which is the extension that we've applied for. We filed a license application in 2014 to extend that short-lived repository to be able to handle the decommissioning waste that we're expecting from shutting down the power stations. And then up top right, there is a future repository being planned. We expect that to come into operation around 2045. That's the final repository for the long-lived waste, which would be reactor internals and other legacy waste from the research program. But that's not the focus of this presentation. I am going to focus on the high-level waste, which is the spent fuel stream, which is the red part of the slide down at the bottom. We also pick that up from the power stations, transport it by ship to a central intermediate storage that we have in operation today in Oskarshamn, which is wet storage about 30 meters in the bedrock, below the bedrock. And we have also filed an application in 2011 for a system for handling the spent fuel, which comprises an encapsulation plant, encapsulation factory on top of the intermediate storage, where we're going to encapsulate it in copper, send it north to the final repository, which we've chosen a site for, which is Forsmark. And the copper canisters are going to be placed around 470 meters depth, surrounded by bentonite, and then the third barrier would be the bedrock. And this system is what we call the KBS3 system, which is a Swedish design originally, but which we for the past years have been developing together with our Finnish colleagues at Posiva, and indeed they've received a license for this method in Finland. So that briefly outlines the Swedish back-end system as it looks today. And how did we get there? Well, if you follow the arrow on the top, we started obviously with developing methodology in the 70s and 80s, performing feasibility studies and further developing our scientific knowledge around the methods, moving into site investigations and further technology development, and leading up to where we are today, which is trying to implement this technology in the licensing process. On the bottom end of the arrow, you see the sort of physical facilities that we've built with the transport of MS Sigyn was our first transport ship. CLAB is the intermediate storage for the spent fuel. SFR is the final repository for the low-level, short-lived waste. And the laboratories, the hard rock laboratory, the canister laboratory, the bentonite laboratory, actually where we can demonstrate these processes in full scale, learn about them, but I think equally important, also show this to stakeholders. What is it going to look like? How does it work? And learning as we go along. An important aspect of our development has been transparency, and one of the important tools when communicating with stakeholders, which is something that SKB has put a lot of effort into, is the RD&D program, which we publish every third year. It's a legal obligation for us to do that, and it outlines basically all of the activities that we need to perform within RD&D in order to complete our job, which we expect will move well into the 2080s as it looks today. I think this this document, which is published and reviewed by stakeholders, by the regulator, by NGOs, by the academy and the scientific community, I think it provides a very good basis for our communication. I think it's very important for our credibility, which DG Magwood also spoke about when we stand in front of people and say this is going to be safe for 100,000 years, that our science has been challenged by the scientific community and reviewed in a transparent, open way. I think this program also of publishing our activities and our planned activities every 3 years is also an effective method for enabling society, and I think specifically about the nuclear regulator and municipalities and academy. It prepares them for what areas of knowledge they need to build up competence in order for them to review our work and review what we're doing. So I think it's been a successful tool for transparency. Also, in addition to this, every third year we produce a cost analysis or a cost forecast, which also lays the basis for the financial fees that the nuclear power producers pay into the Nuclear Waste Fund, which finances our work. So moving forward, I'm going to be focusing on the application for spent fuel, but indeed any nuclear facility in Sweden has to be licensed according to two laws, the Environmental Code and the Nuclear Act. And this means it's a quite complicated licensing process where the Environmental Court obviously judges if we fulfill the requirements in the Environmental Code. The Nuclear Radiation Safety Authority reviews our application according to the Nuclear Act. They then make a recommendation to the government, who also has to consult the municipalities where these facilities are to be located. And I think I just want to spend a few words on the veto right of the municipalities, because according to Swedish law, municipalities in Sweden indeed have a high level of independence and sovereignty compared to local government in many other countries. I think the veto right when it comes to new nuclear facilities is another sign of this, and it means that we as an industry actor, we can't come in and dictate how we want to do things. We have to approach the municipalities and local government as an equal and work in partnership and make sure that we have an agreement on how to run these facilities going forward. And indeed, public support is important for us, and we make annual polls, and today 70 to 80% of the population in these municipalities support our plans. Of course, we can't lean back. We've seen recently how unsure opinion polls are, and so I think we need to work every day with keeping confidence of the public and of local government, of course. But the final decision whether these facilities are permissible or not lies with the cabinet, the national government of Sweden, and then the Environmental Court and the Radiation Safety Authority, after an approval from the government, stipulate the terms and conditions under which we're allowed to operate or build the facility. What's been happening recently since the application in 2011, under the Nuclear Act, the first thing that happened was the NEA peer review of the safety case, which had a positive outcome, said it was up to international standards and a good basis for judging the safety. We've had several rounds of requests for complementary information from SSM after 2 rounds of public consultations. And also, finally, now in June, we did receive a positive statement from SSM to the Environmental Court saying that for this stage, our application shows that we can fulfill the requirements of safety, both when it comes to site, method, and safety. But it's important to remember that SSM also outlines about 450 issues that we have further work to do in for later stages of the process. In the Environmental Code, we've had rounds of public consultations, and a lot of complementary information has been supplied by us. We had an official announcement that the application was complete in 2016. We're still waiting for a date for the court hearing. They say now earliest in September 2017, but there are some legal proceedings ongoing as to when this can take place. So that's still uncertain at this stage. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip that slide, but please feel free to review it and ask me questions later. Just to outline some of the challenges, I think these two parallel and partly overlapping reviews is an issue for us. And indeed, according to Swedish law, the court and the safety authority could arrive at different conclusions, that it would be permissible under one law but not the other, which would obviously provide the government with a difficult situation. I think the long period that this process has been going on, we're more than 5 years into the review process and we still haven't come to the environmental court hearing. That is a problem in itself. There are two review phases, one about the completeness of the application, and the second review phase, which we're now in, is about the factual issues in the application, has led to this sort of review ping-pong where stakeholders review and ask us questions, we respond, there come more questions from the stakeholders and then we respond. I think we're coming to the end of that ping-pong match now, but it has been a challenge and it's produced a vast amount of information. In addition to the 6,000 or 7,000 pages that the original application was, we've added another 6,000 or 7,000 pages. So it's a huge amount of information for stakeholders to take in. Also, it's the first step of a stepwise licensing process, and as you can imagine, we're expected to detail as we move along through construction up to operation in more and more advanced safety analysis reports, how the facility is going to function in the post-closure safety case, of course. But there are obviously different opinions as to how much we need to know and present now and how much can be presented at a later stage. And I do sometimes get the question, if we're so sure that this is safe, why do we need continued research? And my answer is simply this. I think we can never stop in our search for knowledge about the processes that are important to the safety of a final repository. One, to increase our level of certainty, of course, but also it will also enable us to make less pessimistic assumptions in our safety case, and that will allow us also to optimize the facilities going forward. I think also we need to increase our knowledge around how we're going to implement this in practice, how we're going to industrialize these processes, of course, and develop inspection and testing methods. And that indeed is something that we're working very hard on now and preparing for now in preparing for the implementation phase. And this is something we're doing with our Finnish colleagues at Posiva. A lot of this work is being done jointly with them. And some of the examples are looking into rock investigation methods and technology, doing the detailed design and manufacturing process for the canister and also the testing of those, so we assure that the quality is up to what is described in the safety case, and having qualified verification methods for that. I'm also going to skip that slide in the interest of time and move to my concluding remarks, which are that going from an application to implementation indeed is not a straight and short road, as the Beatles said. It's a long and winding road. I think the complicated process can indeed be frustrating, but I think there is a positive aspect of this extended review, and that is that at the end of it, whatever happens, nobody with credibility will be able to say that they didn't have a chance to speak up or voice their opinion or say what they thought about it. Overall, we are making progress, and in an international perspective, we are moving along at a good pace, and so far there haven't been any showstoppers in our licensing process. Looking forward, what are our remaining challenges? Well, of course, we actually need the final approval from the Radiation Safety Authority, from the Environmental Court, from the 2 municipalities and the national government, so we need our 5 yeses. Also, we, as an organization, need to move from theory to practice. We have a lot of operational experience from our interim storage and our final repository for the low-level waste, but we need to transfer that into a new facility, of course, and succeed in that. And last but not least, keeping the public confidence that I dare to say that we still do have. And I think three things there are most important. One is that SKB continues to be transparent in communication, giving both good and bad news, also informing and listening at the same time. Number two is a strong and independent regulator, which I believe we have. It was also mentioned before, but it's one of the key elements of public confidence. And last but not least, I think the tireless effort of the municipalities that are taking part in this process, in both from the political side but also public officials in the municipality, the work that they do in reviewing us, challenging us, but also working in partnership on how to prepare these communities for this type of facility is key to keeping the public confidence as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Christopher Eckerberg. So now it's time for questions and answers. So we had many different experiences, and you talked about frustration and challenges, all of you. Some people who met very important problems and even incidents or accidents with the whip you talked about a moment ago. Some of you have taken the time to listen to the stakeholders in society and media, and regulatory authorities, of course. So all of these experiences, of course, are different and can perhaps ask questions about your own and individual process, and we already have some questions about that. For example, a question has been asked about, given the experience in Sweden and the whip, how Switzerland and even the UK, and why not Belgium, see future challenges that are ahead for you. Do you take experience from that, and how do you manage that? Who wants to answer first?
Okay, I'll have a go first. So from a UK perspective, we have very close cooperation with our sister organisations overseas. In fact, at the end of this week, we have a meeting of the EDRAM, which is all of the leaders of the Geological Disposal Implementation Programme. So we learn a great amount from the challenges that have been faced and overcome from our overseas colleagues. In particular, I think we learn the importance of the things which are the really tricky issues, and they're not always the things that transfer easily. So the technology we can learn from, and we can transfer technical information very simply, really. But when it comes to sort of building trust, engaging with communities, getting a lasting relationship with communities, we can get the principle of that's required, but have to kind of develop our own ways of taking that forward.
What about social media? Because you talked about it after incidents. Are you focused on it, especially nowadays?
We are, yeah, and as part of our communication strategy building up to the siting process, there's a whole element on, well, it's all digital by default, and there's a whole element on social media and you know, how we will respond to it. Things which previously could explode as a media storm in days can happen in kind of minutes and hours now. So we have to be prepared for that.
Mm-hmm. Thomas, perhaps about Switzerland, what's your position?
Well, at the moment I'm chairing EDRAM. I will have the possibility to give you more information about that tomorrow afternoon, but I would like to underline what Bruce has just said. You know, information exchange among international organizations does not only take place on, let's say, top official levels. There is a very intense collaboration also among RD&D coordinators, about engineers, geologists, and I think this is essential for the progress. And all of them have one common goal. That's the implementation of a long-term safe repository. And they are really very ambitious. They are very engaged in this task. And I'm really very convenient that those people are really willing and capable of making a good job. And that gives me confidence. And of course, communication is the other part. It's also essential that we try to communicate also with our experts, with our engineer, to the public, to the people in the region, that they see it's not only a top management language that talks about implementation of deep geological repository. It's also the basis of our organization that is visible and that is heard. And I think I would like to give you one example what I specifically mean by this general information. I mentioned that we performed three-dimensional seismic analysis in different siting regions, and this was quite a major task to do. We did need the right to access a few thousand land properties. And we had to contact several thousand landowners to get the permission to use their land for these measurements. We got an acceptance rate of above 95% in all siting regions. So that shows that people really see we do have waste, we do need to do something with this waste. There is probably no alternative to deep geological repositories. And how can you do siting? You do need adequate scientific information about the deep underground. And that's also why citizens see and accept the measurements, the work we are doing, and they support us by giving their land for the investigation. And that was a very positive experience that shows, I think, the dialogue we are doing is in the right dimension and goes into the right direction. We are stepping ahead, of course, as I said before, not always as fast as we would like to, but we advance, and there is some level of confidence and trust, and this is essential.
So public trusts you. What about in the US after the problems you got in WIP? What about the dialogue with society and you called it social media? And is it now being settled? Do you have improvements, more trust, more confidence?
Yes. Is this working?
Yeah, it's working.
Okay. Well, yes. There was a degree of chaos that occurred after the incident at first, and it did take quite some time to get it settled down. But now it appears that we are moving along in a much better path, much more open. There are dialogues, weekly dialogues with the DOE that happen in the community, and monthly meetings as well. And the whole DOE has worked much harder to be talking about these things and socializing things as we go, as they go. And of course, there's been about 2 years, coming up on maybe 3 years. Yeah, it'll be coming up on 3 years of time to be able to work on this while they are moving forward to try to get back to operations.
So it's a long way. This morning we heard of radical opponents in France, namely. Do you think that there are the same kinds of opponents in the US, for example, especially after accidents?
So in the case of WIP, frankly, we did at one time have some radical opponents, and that was before really the opening of WIP. Now most of the radical opponents are channeled into the regulatory process, where we have the EPA holds public meetings whenever there is a decision that's going to be made, and we do see some opinions that are rather radical there at those types of meetings, but we don't, at this time, we don't have staged demonstrations and so forth. Frankly, the size of the country is one thing, and the location of WIP is the fact that it's down in the southeast corner of New Mexico, and most of the people in that region are very much in favor of the disposal initiative. And also, we're located now next to another disposal facility in Andrews, Texas, which is the waste control specialists. And so, I mean, that's another indication that basically the area is very much acclimated to the idea of the disposal mission.
Okay. Jean-Paul, about the process in Belgium, do you meet problems with public with perhaps social problems about the process, running process?
I will answer more generally.
There's a question for Belgium, so I'm asking.
We have two processes. We need two processes. I was impressed by the presentation of Christopher. At the one side, we have the regulatory process. And we are facing the same as you for the surface disposal facility. We also got a huge amount of questions, and we are now answering those questions. We are nearing the end of the process, but it took a long time. And we are rewriting the safety report. And I have to recognize that there is an increasing in precision and so on. So the process with the safety authority is certainly an important added value. At the other time, it is at the other side, it is time-consuming. Time is money, but during that time, the population see nothing on the floor, on the field. And it is a problem to maintain public involvement because we are discussing, people are discussing, but always the same. And I must say we can be very transparent about the discussion with the safety authorities. Not everybody has the technical level or scientific level to follow, I will say, in the detail. They understand the process, certainly, but to follow in the scientific detail is not possible. So you see, we have to keep the win-win situation. In the one side, the win of the waste management organization is the side. The win of the population is the added value that the sign can mean for the local population and the region. And that is a big challenge. Because we have two processes in parallel, and you have one process to follow it. The regulatory one, it is more complicated than we have, and then we have the social process. And in fact, at the end, we need two main licenses. The regulatory license from the safety authorities, but also what I call the social license. And naturally, it is a more fuzzy concept, social license. But it has to be there, veto right and all those things. We have not real veto right in our legislation, but we agree that there is a veto right. We will not impose such an installation to a local population. So you see, that's the tricky situation for surface disposal. For geological disposal, in the law that transposes the European directive, according to legislation in Europe and in Belgium, the Waste Management Organization got the initiative right for proposing national policy for the long-term management of radioactive waste. We introduced a proposal in 2015, and we have now had the reaction of the Belgian government to lightly adapt the proposal we made, and we are in the process of decision-making within the Waste Management Organization and afterwards at governmental level.
Okay, all that with transparency, as we said, for the public, and you're trying to popularize, to be clear when you speak of scientific issues. People try to understand you, to make efforts so that they understand what you're doing.
I think that people are absolutely capable to understand the basic safety principles. They can follow, and we have a large experience with the partnership system we developed in Belgium. We have a long tradition of discussion with working groups into the population. It is not only 10 or 20 people, it's a large amount of people, and they are capable to understand the the issue at stake and also how it is dealt with. Naturally, not on the calculation and design efforts and so on.
Okay. So we'll take, of course, time to talk about stakeholders and social issues later on into the conference. As you know, there are sessions dedicated to that, but it's important that people can already talk about that. Do you have direct questions? We can give you the floor with microphone. Yes, okay. So I'm going to give you the microphone, please.
Thank you very much. Pierre-Marie Abadi, I'm the General Director for Android. I have one comment and one question. In the large overview of presentation we had in this session, we saw that we are progressively moving from long-term safety to operational safety. Some of them are still at the siting process. It is based on long-term safety, scientific evidence, etc. Some are already moving to implementation. And my feeling is that now scientific evidence, scientific basis, methodology for long-term safety are available, already implemented in some countries, under implementation in other countries. Now we are more and more facing questions on operational safety. Fire, incidents, construction accident, quality control, etc. The positive point in that is that it's a sign that we are progressing, that we are moving towards implementation. The difficulty is how to answer to the question from stakeholders as long as design is not finished and a safety assessment by the safety regulator and the TSO is not finished. So my question is both to those that are in the implementation, Sweden, US, but also to the other colleagues, how can we answer to the stakeholders' question as long as design is not completed and as long as we are under instruction by the safety authority?
You mean you don't have yourself all the answers about this issue?
As long as we don't have all the answers concerning operational safety.
Okay, right. Yes, please. Christopher.
I think it's necessary to build on the operational experience that we have from the industry. There are several final repositories in operation. We have interim storage. I think it's important for us as nuclear operators to constantly work with our own safety culture and our systematic approach to operational experience. At SKB a few years ago, when we saw moving into implementation in a larger scale, we decided to join the World Association of Nuclear Operators, which come on a regular basis and perform a peer review of our operational methods and ways of working and our culture. Those are ways to sort of add confidence to that we take these issues seriously, that when we implement these facilities, we'll have good ways of operating them safely. And so I think those are some of the things you can do to give confidence that even though we don't know exactly what this facility looks like, we're going to be able to solve that when we approach the day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Christy?
Well, I think that in addition to other nuclear operations, one needs to make use of operations that are similar. And for example, in the case of WIP, this is a repository that is an embedded salt formation, and there have been mining operations in these types of formations for other types of minerals, for salt itself and for...
Was it a good choice? Was it a good choice at the beginning?
Oh, absolutely.
You think?
Oh, yes. I still believe in it 150
Despite
billion%.
all the problems and incidents,
you heavens, yes.
Confident.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there are. I won't go into the advantages of salt, but anyway, my point is that there's a paradigm of operating in a salt mine that can also be used, and to help hold up the safety case in terms of the operational time period.
And there's the same kind of question for most of you or others, if you want, about the fact that we don't have all the answers to the questions that can be asked. The same situation for the regulators and the safety authority. What about their credibility? Because they didn't face such situations before. It's brand new for everyone. Nobody did it before. So how can they be sure themselves, and how can they give license to these operational repositories?
Well, you'll have to ask a regulator.
That's right. They will be there later anyway.
I think our approach in Sweden has been to, base our safety case on scientific knowledge. We're using, even though in one aspect you could say this is very high tech, in another aspect it's very low tech. We're using copper, bentonite, bedrock. These are materials that we can see historically how they've behaved for periods which are much longer than our safety case looking forward is talking about. And I think just exposing our work to scientific review from the rest of the scientific community is also one thing we can do to raise credibility and to build our own confidence that we've actually got it right. Because if you're too self-confident, then you obviously risk the way of going wrong.
Okay, and Thomas? For Switzerland?
Yeah, I think we should not underestimate the knowledge that is available worldwide about the construction of underground facilities. For example, in Switzerland, we've just opened the longest railway tunnel in the world. It has a length of 57 kilometers and will go into operation in the next few days or weeks. This project was finished within the budget and within the planned timescale. So I think it's really possible to do complex underground construction work, and that is one basis for the construction of deep geological repositories. And the other one, of course, also if you look at the WIP incidents, it's the experience and the knowledge in conditioning and handling waste. And I mean, in all our countries, we have been conditioning and handling waste now for many decades. It's an extent knowledge is available, and now we have to combine the two things, including operational aspects. And by combining these three things, I think we will be able to do it in a convenient, cost-adequate, and safe manner.
So it's only engineering issues for you that are known, well known.
No. As I said, engineering issues are well known. The elements of waste handling and conditioning, that's chemistry, that's physics, that's much more than engineering.
Right, Jean-Paul.
Yes, concretely, we have also, as Thomas said, but the experience of the different underground laboratories. So this is an important aspect that is perhaps forgotten, but in many countries there are underground laboratories, in Belgium running for nearly 40 years. So we have got a huge experience from the technical point of view. The feasibility for constructing, for instance, a repository in clay in Belgium is done. We have done it. We know the host rock as far as it goes on clay. So there is an important experience, but it will never be possible to demonstrate everything in the way that it is a demonstration and we will be able to verify. It is a matter of evidence that nobody of us will be able to check that the repository is running well within 1,000 years. So that's inherent to that installation.
We have to take the risk. We have to take the risk.
It is not to take the risk, it is to evaluate the risk and to master the risk. In that way and we introduce in the frame of IWMC the concept of safety case. The safety case is to gather all the information and the evidence that are converging to establish that the disposal facility can operate on the long run standalone on a safe way. So we will never be able to demonstrate everything, but we have to establish a high level of confidence that the safety in the long run is well guaranteed.
Okay. Are there questions? Yes, we're going to bring you a microphone, please. Thanks. To introduce yourself, please.
I'm David Cameron. I'm on the Advisory Council of the Nuclear Waste Management Organization in Canada. And I had a question, just a simple question for Bruce McCurdy. You said that there were three, if I understood you right, you said there were three communities that were interested in participating. One backed out and the whole program came to a halt. How come?
There were three communities within the same area. So one of the communities was a county, which is a kind of higher level, bigger area, within which two borough councils also expressed an interest. So by the county saying they didn't want to proceed, the county had jurisdiction over both of the other areas.
Thank you. Another question? Yeah, we're going to bring the microphone.
I am Christophe Davis from the European Commission. I am project officer on the research program for Euratom. I've got a question for Mr. Ekeberg. I mean, we know that Finland and Sweden have the same concept, the KBS3, and they've done some developments in parallel and in cooperation. Now the question, do you plan to prolong this cooperation in actual production in common of components for your both repositories?
Pardon me, could you repeat the question?
The question is, do you plan to construct components that would be used in both repositories together?
Yes, well, the short answer is yes, if it's possible. Our Finnish colleagues are ahead of us because, of course, they've already received their construction license. They're also down at repository depth already. So they are several years ahead of us in a time schedule. But we are actually evaluating and looking into concrete possibilities of having joint production facilities to see if it's feasible. But we don't have any answers yet. But we are definitely looking into that possibility.
Mm-hmm. Right. Other questions?
Yes, thank you. I'm Morley Forster. I'm the mayor of the township of Hornpain in northern Ontario, Canada. In light of the fact that Sweden and Switzerland are backing away from nuclear power, I'm wondering how their intent is to provide electricity in the future, and also more importantly, what's the message that backing away from nuclear energy is giving to the anti-nuclear group? Is it giving them more credence that nuclear energy is not a good thing? So those are the questions I'd like to hear from.
Okay, political issues. Mm?
Okay, I'll start. The recent energy policy, which was agreed by the Swedish government, was, among other things, to remove the nuclear production tax to give a commercial basis for the remaining 6 reactors to run more or less their operational life. At the same time, the ambition on increasing renewable energy was raised, and so it was decided to introduce another, I think, 18 terawatt hours of renewable energy into the Swedish production system. And the ambition of the coalition of parties which represent a majority in the parliament in Sweden is to have a fully renewable energy system, I think by the year 2040, is that correct? Okay, I'm getting some nods from my Swedish colleagues here. That itself does not constitute an end date for nuclear production, but I think what you have to the conclusion you have to draw from there is that Sweden, by then, the political ambition is that Sweden should be reliable solely on renewable energy by that date, and if we produce any excess nuclear, it should be exported. I guess that's the conclusion. When it comes to the anti-nuclear movement, I think it's hard to say. I think historically we've in the back end of the system we've encountered opposition from anti-nuclear NGOs, for example, and obviously it's in challenging our technology and safety. But I think also there has been an element of trying to slow down anything that has to do with nuclear. And I see a movement away from that tendency, and I think parts of the anti-nuclear NGOs now see that if we have the intention to actually shut down nuclear power stations and we want the ability to decommission them, we can't also be against all of the repositories that are being planned. And so I think we are seeing a slightly more constructive approach there.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Thomas?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I'm responsible for nuclear waste disposal and not for energy policy in Switzerland. So maybe I'm not the most competent person to answer your question. But I think it's clear Switzerland is a somewhat comfortable situation. 60% of our electricity is produced by hydropower, 40% by nuclear at the moment. Of course, the government and I think also a majority of the population wants future investments of renewable energies. They would like to step out of the use of nuclear. The question, how fast can that be done? And the votation we had 10 days ago showed that the majority of the population is not convinced that a fast change would really be beneficial. Because what would be the alternative of a quite soon shutdown of all the nuclear power plants in Switzerland? There would be additional need for importation of nuclear energy, and that would be coal energy from Germany or Eastern Europe or nuclear from France. And that is not an alternative for the majority of our population. Now the government is on the way to implement a new strategy, a so-called Energy Strategy 2050. Also the word 2050 shows that's also a process that will take time, and we will see how things develop. For the next 10 to 20 years, the Swiss nuclear reactors may be operated as long as the Nuclear Safety Inspectorate considers them to be safe. So there is time for future improvement and for new developments. Where we will be in 10 or 20 years, I don't know. We just have to wait and see.
So there will be a long transition before being sure. Another question which is sometimes sensitive to stakeholders and society in general, it's costs. Is it cost effective? I'm not sure if we can talk about that like that, but the cost question is raising up everywhere. This morning, Virginie Schwartz reminded that the CGO and project and the French repository project would cost about 25 billion euros. You said a moment ago, Christopher, that you were estimating a cost, that you had cost forecast. Where are you today, and what about the others?
Yeah, as I said, by law, we're expected to make a cost forecast every 3 years, around about the same time we present our RD&D program. The current estimate, which was made in 2013, we're in the process of updating the numbers right now, was that the remaining cost is about, give or take, 10 billion euros for the remaining work. But that includes the low-level waste. It also includes the decommissioning cost of the 12 reactors. And what we have seen historically is that the reference cost in our cost forecast increases, which is basically the base scenario. As we have more knowledge of what needs to be done, we see that our original estimates have been slightly optimistic. But what we also see is that the uncertainty analysis, because there's an element of risk add-on that you put into these calculations when you look into different scenarios, what might happen, that risk add-on is decreasing. And I think that makes some sense, that the more knowledge we have, the base cost increases and the uncertainty decreases. But I'm very humble that, I mean, every year we hand in a forecast. We think, that is our best estimate. But I'm very humble that we don't know all the answers. And we need to be very humble what kind of technological developments might be during the lifetime of running one of these facilities up until 2080 or 2085 or something like that. There could be developments that, could bring the cost either up or down. And so we need to be humble that there is a level of uncertainty.
So you're adjusting every year, every 2 years, 3 years, a new cost?
Yes. And that then lays the foundation for the per kilowatt hour fee that the reactor operators have to pay into the Nuclear Waste Fund. Again, I think, like the Energy Director said this morning, there needs to be cash somewhere to pay for this bill, even if the reactors have shut down for some reason or something like that. So there is a fund for that.
But your scenario today, not too pessimistic, would be about 10 billions.
Another 10 billion.
Another 10
in addition
billions.
to all of the money that we spent already, which is about 3 billion. So that gives a ballpark
not that
figure.
much, right? And what about Christie for the US, for example?
Frankly, I'm not sure I'm really in a position to say much about the cost, except that there are funding mechanisms that are in place in the United States, like for high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel. There is a fund that all of the utilities pay into, so that the money is there. It's supposed to be there so that the government will make a disposal facility for them. As far as the WIP costs, we basically operate year by year on a budget that is approved by Congress, and you know, I don't really know what else to say about that. I mean, I know what our yearly budget is.
Yeah,
but
not prospective.
But yeah.
Okay, Bruce, please.
Yes, well, currently we don't have a site for a geological disposal facility, but we do have to produce estimates of what we think it will cost. So we consider 3 different geological environments, 3 different types of design. We know the inventory that we've got from the legacy, and we know a planning basis for the inventory from new nuclear reactors. So we provide an annual cost estimate that does 2 things. One, it informs the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority's annual report and accounts, an assessment of the overall nuclear liability costs from the legacy. And the other thing it informs is the calculation of the waste management costs for future new build reactors to make sure funds can be put in place to deal with waste from those programs.
Okay, and Thomas?
Yeah, I mean, in Switzerland there is an ordinance that defines the procedure how costs have to be evaluated every 5 years. And the update of 2016 has been finished. It has been sent to the authorities, and there will be a publication next week with all the new numbers. I know those numbers, but it's too early to communicate.
You can do that
anything.
for us. We're just all together.
Just a few days, and then you will get all the details. But it's important. This time we use the new method, which is part of the ordinance, and these methods not only deals with ordinary cost estimates, it deals also with all the possible chances and risk dangers of such a project. They had to be evaluated, quantified, and all of them are, all these issues are now part of the new estimate. And it also shows how uncertainties are also covered by this cost estimate. And this new estimate will make sure that the waste producers really pay sufficient funding into the fund that is under the guidance of the Swiss federal government, and that makes really sure that in the future there will be enough money available to construct, to operate, and finally to close the deep geological repositories.
But your estimate, is it like in Sweden or in France, has it increased?
In the past, it has, over several stages, it has increased. We had also changes in the boundary conditions. We will see how this develops this time.
We won't succeed in getting an answer. Anyway, what about Belgium, perhaps, Jean-Paul?
Yes, we have also some legislative instrument. There is the law of 2003 organizing the covering of the nuclear costs. What does it mean? Because what is cost? In Belgium, the counter starts when a fuel element is taken out of the reactor vessel. So you have to define what is the start point and what is the end point. This is what you are covering. It is important when you make cost comparison, because we don't always compare the same thing, or we do not always cover the same thing. We have an exercise on the 3 year, and the cost estimation is made by what we call the provisioning company that is responsible to establish the provision on one side for fuel management, long-term fuel management, including reprocessing if such, or conditioning of waste, transportation, the construction of the repository. And I must say that the part of the repository is not so important. It is perhaps 30-35%. Mm-hmm. So there are many other costs in the back end of the fuel cycle. And we have a progressive system. We are on the run, and it will be published or publicly available at the end of the month, so I am in the same situation as you. It is a systematic exercise. As a waste management company, we are in charge of reviewing the cost estimation of the provisioning company. But with the cost, you have not covered the liability in the long run, because you have naturally the cost estimation. I would call that overnight cost, as if everything should be realized in the night before today. But then you have also the economical parameters, because if you put money aside, you hope that that money will produce other money. Switzerland is well known for that. That is naturally a very tricky factor. You saw the project development. It is up to the end of the century and even in the next century. Mm-hmm. So the challenge is how to cope with the economical parameters on such a long run. You spoke about the risk about safety, but we have a huge uncertainty regarding financing if we have to live with the existing funds. Naturally, there is a good system, I think, in every state for electricity production, the nuclear fuel cycle, but we have also naturally a liability cost, ancient pilot installation, research installation, and this is also a cost. The only exercise that was complete and that I know is the one that was done at the demand of the French government by the Cour des Comptes in France. They published such a book. There is a cost evaluation of that. And what is important, an order of magnitude, it is that waste management is certainly not the most important cost of the nuclear cost. It is around 2 or 3% of the total money that was given in France for the development, use, research of nuclear energy.
Okay, and I will talk about that later too during the session this afternoon about CGO. Okay, I have another question on your card. I remind you that you can use cards to write down your questions, and we'll try to answer them. And if you have other questions, you can put them in the little red box behind you just at the entrance. If you didn't get your answer or another question that came later, you can put it into the box, and then we'll try to have them answered later. So this question, because we just talked about France. In France, there will be a pilot phase leading up to full operation. This plan will last approximately 10 years and will show to stakeholders the safety of the repository. What are the plans in other countries? So who wants to start answering? Yes, Thomas.
Yeah, I tried to show that on one of my slides. After the general license application, before we will get the construction license for the Deep Geological Repository, we will have to construct underground research facility at the location where the repository will be built. And there we will have to do additional investigations just to make sure that the whole behavior of the system is comparable and is in parallel to the reporting we have been doing so far. So that's also one of the reasons why it takes so much time from a general license to a construction license. This time span in the past was shorter. This was criticized by reviewing our waste management program. And that's the reason why we are publishing in the new Waste Management Program, also next week, this longer so-called pilot or underground research phase. This is more or less comparable. We are in the same boat as France.
Okay, right. Christopher?
In Sweden, there is no pilot phase envisaged. The Swedish licensing process is that you need a preliminary safety analysis report to start construction. It has to be approved by the safety authority. Then before you start test operations, you need an updated, or you need a full safety analysis report, which needs to be approved. Test operations are typically for, on the year scale or something like that, and then the safety analysis report is updated, and then you get a full operational license. But it's important to remember that's not, a green light for forever. Every 10 years, nuclear facilities have to produce a periodic safety review, which shows how we fulfill the safety case and also take into account potentially new safety regulations and higher safety requirements. So there's always this element of keeping up to speed with what's going on in the world, in the industry, and sort of, continuous improvements, as you would say.
Okay. You want to? Yeah, of course.
So within the UK, there's no policy or legislation or regulatory requirement to have a pilot facility. But of course, we need the regulatory authorisations and the consenting community. And until we have the discussions with the consenting community, or the potentially consenting community, we don't know what they'll require to demonstrate to them. That the facility will be safe, and so there is a potential for demonstration facilities, but they're not currently planned at the moment.
All right, not time yet. Okay, is there another or last question maybe, because we're just at the end of this session? We just reached it. No, especially. So thank you very much for all your presentations and comments, Thomas Ernst, Bruce McCready, Chris Alex, and Christopher Ekeberg, and of course Jean-Paul Minon, chairman of the session. Thanks to all of you.